everybody. Um, if you're not aware, my name is Leanne Despodes, and I'm welcoming you all tonight. This is so wonderful to see such a lovely crowd. And just a little bit of business before we start. If you haven't, please sign our sign-in sheet before you leave so we can establish that we really do have community programs when I do our annual report. And if you or your family are interested in becoming a member, there are membership forms on the back table. Howard Williamson is taking care of all that. And there are also DVDs of past programs and mugs depicting the mural, all kinds of cool things that you might want to add to your collection. And while you're back there, please enjoy some cookies and a drink of lemonade or water. After a 2.5-year hiatus, we are back and so happy to have this presentation. It was all set for 2020, but COVID. Then it was all set for 2021, but COVID again. Dennis has shown remarkable patience, and here we are, finally, to learn about the Hickey family and its history in Bailey's Harbor's commercial fishing industry. I think you may be very surprised at all the things you'll find out today. Next month, just so you know, we will be having another program on August 17th. Patty Williamson will fill us in on early grocery stores in northern Door County. Be sure and join us. I think you'll find that, quote, grocery store had a slightly different meaning and purpose in the early days of the 20th century than it has today. We'll look forward to seeing you then. And now I would love to introduce Dennis Hickey. I cannot. Oh, there you are. Stand in front of that light for me.
Okay, I'll do that.
Oh, thank you so much. And he will take you on a lovely journey from the middle of the 19th century right up to today. So thank you so much, Dennis.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.
Ooh, I'm sorry. I almost forgot.
And I first want to give some credit to a couple of the things that I used to try and pin down a lot of the stories I've heard over the years and to get some actual dates and numbers on them and that. I've got a book called The Schooners of Door County, and I got this at the Maritime Museum down in Sturgeon Bay. And there was, during the early days here in Bailey's Harbor, there was a tremendous amount of schooners and activity. This book was written by two people in North Bay, Wisconsin. Then the other book is a book by Beverly Anklem. That's this one here, and I've got all kinds of markers in there. I've got it, I've had it about 10 years, and I've taken it with us on vacation to Costa Rica, and I sit and I read it and everything. Beverly used to come over. She was retired, and she lived on the island that we built our dock, and she wound up selling the land to us to have a dock over there. So then she would come over when we were dressing fish and talk about all the things. She was basically bored and looking for something to do. She would go down to the Door County Advocate and go through their microfiche at that time. Now I think you can go to the library in Sturgeon Bay and pull it up right there at the library. But anyhow, and then she was talking about different things, and then one day I said to her, you know what would be interesting, Beverly, is if everything that had to do with schooners or boats or fishing, if you were to just take a copy of that article and put it all together in a book form. I don't know if you'd call this a book or not, but it's just one article from the Advocate after the other, but it always has the date. And that's what I really appreciate out of it, is because I've heard a lot of the stories over the years, but I didn't know for sure just how it all fit together and that. And so I'd like to give, this is available, Leanne just told me, at the Historical Society. If you're a lifetime member, you can maybe check it out or borrow it or sit there and read it. I don't know how they go about it, but it's unbelievable. It gives you a real good idea and feeling about what it was like from, say, I think it's 1854, that was the first documented fishing company here. And it was in Mud Bay, too. They didn't call it Moonlight Bay in those days. But anyhow, it was the Mud Bay Fish Company in 1854. And from there on up into the 1900s, it covers boats coming and going, schooners coming and going, a lot of comments on how much fish were, the price of fish during that time, who was fishing, what they were fishing, and actually it's just, I've referred to it a lot because, you know, they sometimes say history repeats itself, or sometimes you hear comments that fish or animals may have a cycle. And I really believe that, because you'll see that maybe a fish cycle will come up 2, 3, 4 times in here. And the fish come to the same places, and being as that we're fishing, we'll wind up going to those same spots and really having good catches in that. So with that, then I think we can go ahead, Karen. I think one of the first surprises that you may have, maybe the local people here may know, but other people may not, is this is my grandfather's house that he bought from the Kilgore family. And this whole area here was his farm. And the house sat right out here on the corner in the front yard of the town hall here. That's where we are. If you look at the White House kitty corner behind it over there on this side, that's my grandfather's brother, Reinert Hickey. And he had that house built. And he was in the Coast Guard station over by the Bailey's Harbor Yacht Club. At that time, I think they called it the life-saving station over there. And then the rest of the area straight down here was my grandfather's pasture. And now that's all built up over the years down there. This is a picture of one of the early fish tugs trying to break out. This was probably over by Winnegar's dock. It's a wooden boat, and they didn't have much power or anything, and that's the only way they could get out of the harbor in the winter time. As a rule, Bailey's Harbor doesn't freeze over, but if we were fishing chubs or anything, we always deliberately would take the boat and cut through the ice around the end of the harbor when the wind would come from the northeast, let the ice drift out so it never froze up. But they also looked at Bailey's Harbor as a very important harbor throughout the early years, because it was an open harbor. Like if you think about it, you look at all of northern Lake Michigan and all of Lake Michigan for that matter, the harbors all freeze over in the winter. And then if you go to the bayside, that's all frozen in all the way up through Escanaba and all, that's all frozen in. Most years. There are years that it doesn't freeze in. But anyway, this picture is kind of a little bit out of sync, but that's what it was about. To show that you could get out of this harbor almost all we can with the boats we have now. We go out all year long. We can get through the ice with no trouble. This picture is a picture of my grandfather's dock, which would be down behind the town marina, or actually right where the town marina is. I don't know, I can't see any pictures of the docks, but I would guess there's probably was 2 or 3 small docks that the commercial fishermen laid at down there along this marina. And it was behind the big dock which was originally for schooners that were hauling things in and out of Bailey's Harbor. And that dock was about 1,000 feet long, and it had about 17 feet of water on the end of it. And it went out to the southeast. And last summer I was over behind what was Gary Nelson's hardware store there, and out to the southeast behind what was McCardle's house. And there's still big cribs out there from that original dock. And the schooners would come to load there. And it first was built by Severin. He was one of the first settlers here, and he was an investor. And he bought and sold and plotted a lot of Bailey's Harbor. And then it was sold to Ward. And then it went to Moses Kilgore. And Moses Kilgore probably had the longest period of time that he had the dock and the general store at the end of it, which was right across the street from the house there. And that house was built by Moses Kilgore that we still have it in the family. That house sits down there. Now, my dad moved it down there when he sold this lot here to the town to build a town hall. And it sits across from the Ridges Sanctuary. That house was built in 1860. But I had this picture. I took it out of the schooners of Door County just so you could see approximate size and everything of what all the schooners must have looked like out here, anchored in the harbor or otherwise loading and coming and going. And that little tug there in front of it is the Kitty Smoke that belonged to Berger Boat Works in Manitowoc. And we didn't have a regular tug up here, so the boats had to sail into the dock and sail out of the dock. And there, when you read this one of Beverly's, you'll see all the entries of all the ships and schooners, I shouldn't say ships, schooners mostly, and smaller sailing vessels that are sunk all over in the harbor. And most of all, quite a few of them ran aground out on the reef out there and that. Do you want to give me the next picture? Yeah, that's a better picture of a schooner under sail. A schooner under sail, a lot of them were barks. In other words, two masts. And then they got re-outfitted, and they lengthened them out to about 106 feet. And so that way they could put another mast on them. And they could get up to 17 miles an hour if they had decent wind. So they could haul, load here in Bailey's Harbor, and they could haul to Chicago in a day and a half. They're sailing all night and everything, So it was a good way to move product around in that. The reason that it was so popular at that time, there was no road even to get to Sturgeon Bay. And it was during Moses Kilgore's time here in Bailey's Harbor that they actually kept building a little more and a little more on the road to get it better and better until they finally could get wagons. And mostly they started with sleighs in the winter. And they used to haul fish. And there's entries in here where it said, it must be good fishing in Gills Rock. We saw 2 sleigh loads of fish go through today, and things like that. It's really, really interesting, all the articles. And they're all in series as far as the dates as it progresses along. You got another one? This is a picture of my grandfather's boat. It might be one of some of the first boats that had an engine. It had a 2-cylinder Strobel engine in it. It wasn't, by our standards now, much of a boat. It probably was about 28 feet long and probably only 8 or 10 feet wide. And the 3 girls on the bow are my oldest aunts, I guess you would call them. And he had another 2 daughters that probably were younger than that, and that's his oldest son there also on the boat. The first fishing that went out of here, though, out of those small docks across the street there, and you might note that right behind it, there's no development at all. That's the shoreline where the bathing beach is, and down there's nothing. And when they talked about going to the life-saving station over there, at the other side of the harbor, everybody traveled up and down the sand beach. There wasn't really any road or anything to get around there at that time. But most of the guys that fished out of here during the earlier days too fished hooks for trout and set hooks. And they had a small ponnet up on the other end of town that they used, they set for bait. And then they'd lift the net, and they'd all share the bait. They'd all take turns lifting that net and that. And then a lot of them sailed. And they sailed out. You only had to go just a little ways out of the harbor, and there was good fishing. There still is out there. In the fall, we still set one of our best nets is just outside the harbor line there in Bailey's Harbor, and we get good lifts. This picture is of the lake trout that they were catching. I don't know the exact weight, but I'm guessing that it probably was about a 35 to 40 pounder. But I do remember that my dad told us that there was a 5-pound trout inside of it when they dressed it. So at that time. And that's my two oldest aunts there. Then we wound up buying out Cliff Winiger, which owned the fishery over by the yacht club. And this is a picture of his 3 boats. And we got those 3 boats, but we've built new ones now. But I want to, this is kind of out of sync too. I didn't know just where we would go with some of this stuff. But the fishing out of here for trout was really important in those days. But what they had to do, because they didn't have good refrigeration and everything, they filleted the trout or split them, and then they salted them. And they put them in wooden kegs or barrels. And then they put about 100 pounds in a barrel. And then they added sometimes as much as 10, 15 pounds extra in case it leaked a little bit. But if it leaked too much and it got to market, they wouldn't pay them for it. They would lose the whole price of the whole thing. And so it was really important. I think I saw a couple different amounts of the prices on what the fish was worth then. It was 4 cents a pound on lake trout, and it was $1.50 a barrel for whitefish that were salted and split. So anyhow, the major fishery up here was trout and whitefish at that time. So this is another one of Cliff Winiger's boats. This is the Beaver. It's on the outside end of Cliff's dock, and this dock was where the breakwall is now from the Bailey's Harbor Yacht Club. And that one building in the background up there is the one big fish shed that Cliff moved over that we still have over there. And the zoning has asked, and the planning department has asked us if we would try and preserve that building if we could. And it's we're trying to figure out, who we're going to have work on it to try and keep it because it's one of the last fish buildings that are left from the fisheries here in Door County. And that's why we have the other 2 buildings that are there too, in amongst the newer buildings over by the fishery now. And that the 3 guys on the top are Rusty Meyer out of Algoma. I don't know if anybody knew Rusty. And then Gene Heel, which is would be my dad's brother-in-law. He married Gladys Heel. Their house was right down here on the corner across from the Ridges. And my dad on the far right there. And they were on the Cub. That was another one of Winiger's boats. And this is Alfred Anklem. He is the father of Beverly Anklem, and that's why she was so interested in fishing and everything. She wanted to make sure that the fishery would never be totally put out of business or anything because they couldn't find dock space or something. So she actually sold us a corner of her land over there so that we could build our own dock. And so that's how we arrived at that dock. And then after she passed away, her children wanted us also to be able to continue on in the fishing business, and they sold us the rest of the property. So that's where we have our dock now, over on that side. It's directly across the harbor on that side. This picture is a picture of the stakes for a 45-foot ponnet. Originally, when Door County was first settled and fishery started, there were ponnets strung all the way from Whitefish Bay and Milwaukee, all the way around through the Door Peninsula, down the Green Bay side, and up the other side. There were ponnets everywhere. They're a very elaborate net, but they're a very good net. We've replaced them now with a modern net that's called a trap net. It's used the same size twine and very similar, except that you can, they call it a submarine trap net earlier too, that it's under the water. And so with all the modern boating traffic that we have in sport fishing and everything, they can go right over the top, but they just can't seem to understand a net like the stakes. The people who have been around here for a while, we fished these in Moonlight Bay and North Bay and Whitefish Bay and Cave Point and all along, but it's been about 8 or 10 years now since we've fished them, and we've switched to the trap net. But they're a very efficient net. But this net is the identical net that would be in 1854 were McDonald and Cummings started their Mud Bay Fish Company. And they in turn sold that to Booz and Adam Hendricks. And they sold that in about 1869. And we talked to our dad about spots to set nets of that, and he told us about some of those spots there in Moonlight Bay. So we set this net there, and it was one of our most productive nets. We worked with the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, for about 9 years on an age, growth, and migration study on the whitefish. And what we did is we kept the net in for them 2 or 3 days after the season would close, and then we took them out on the boats, and they would tag fish. And we studied the migration of the whitefish during their spawning run and everything. And one of the most surprising things that I never thought about, and I don't think a lot of people think about, we had 2 jumbo whitefish come back to that same net in Moonlight Bay. It's on the north side of Moonlight Bay, just off the edge of the Caney Island Reef. And they came back on about the same day to the same net and returned because they had a tag in them. We could tell that. We're presently working with the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, doing a study on tagging fish and looking for where the migration is, whether they go up the rivers on Green Bay or if they go out into the lake, or where they go or where they come and go for spawning and so on and so forth. So this year again, we had them, I think for about 4 or 5 days they rode with us, and they tagged, we let them tag as many as, even though it's open season, we could take the fish. We just let them take the fish and tag them and let them go again. And it's pretty interesting. They also tagged some walleyes over on Green Bay with us about a year or 2 ago. And it was really interesting to see the walleyes went all the way up from southern Green Bay, all the way through the door, down this side of the peninsula, and back through the canal. Not once, but twice we had one walleye do that. So we're constantly working on research and that as much as we can, because it's really important to us to know just exactly what the status of the fish stocks are. But I put this one in there because we no longer fish this net, but it was one of the most popular nets that was fished here, not only in the Door Peninsula, but all the way around Lake Michigan. At one time, there's an article in Beverly's book here that I think says that there were 23 ponets just by Chambers Island alone in there. So that was just generally along the south end and over on the northwest corner of it, they set. But this is another picture of when we were actually setting the net. There is a frame pole along the inside of it that holds up the heart shape of the net, so it holds them out there. There's actually 18 anchors on a net like that, big 100-pound anchors, and all the anchor lines like this one going out to this side are about 300 to 400 feet long, and they're all 3/4 inch and 5/8 inch line, and believe it or not, they're pretty hardy. They're stable net even in storms. But they did tip over on us, but we managed to get them back up again. This is a picture of a typical lift. I had a hold of a lake trout there to throw it overboard, and you can see a lamprey hanging on it there. And that. One of the big things that over the years is the Great Lakes Fishery Commission was assigned the job of trying to come up with a lampricide or eradicate the lamprey to try and reinstate the lake trout that were completely taken out of the Great Lakes by lamprey, and they say also overfishing too. But they have been working now for 50 years to try and get the lake trout to reproduce naturally, and the last 5-6 years we've got, I would think, real good natural reproduction. In gill netting that we did out here this spring ourselves, I always watch every day, all the lake trout that the hatchery puts in, which they put in millions every year too, of lake trout for planting to try and rehabilitate the lake trout fishery, they're all fin clipped. But the ones that have natural reproduction, which we have anywhere from, I would say from 10% to 50% on different days, natural reproduced lake trout out here now. And so we're really encouraged that finally, after all these years, that it's taken hold. And we can tell when we have a natural trout coming in versus a hatchery trout. You can hear it on the lifter pan. The natural trout come in and they just come around the lifter and everything. But a natural reproduced lake trout comes in, boom, 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 boom. You can hear it banging. They're real lively, you know, and they're almost like a different fish, you know, completely. But they were taken to Lewis Lake in out west in Wyoming, and they were put in there to try and save the stock, and then they're taken from there now when they need more brood stock at the hatchery to continue planting at the same time. We have, right now, they still plant about 1.5 million on the southwest corner of Beaver Island, just up from us. And they also plant in southern Lake Michigan on the deep reefs and that of lake trout. But we also have now, they originally put some salmon, which is a big industry with the sport fishery, with the charter boats, and they planted those in some rivers over in Michigan, 3 rivers, and they now are reproducing. So we process a lot of salmon. We vacuum pack and fillet salmon for the sport fishermen, for all the charter boats and that. And so far this year, I've only seen 6 natural, or I should say hatchery salmon. The rest were all natural. So there's over 90% of the salmon that are out there are all natural, which is, it sounds good and it sounds great, but we have to remember these are some pretty big fish, and they're all predator fish, along with the lake trout, which are really the natural predator fish that is out there. Their main food or forage was chubs originally, and they sometimes they eat the alewife now too. but we're going to have to be real careful how much predator fish we're going to get in Lake Michigan in order to feed it all. And so that worries us a lot. That's why we spend a lot of time working with the agencies on trying to get research and various things. This is, I don't know, some of the people here would probably recognize George Lindell. George taught us how to ice fish. And we were, that picture was taken out of Porcupine Bay there, and that's up toward Ellison Bay, out on the ice on Green Bay. And we always got a kick out of George's. It was a very thrifty operation. That's his ice shanty, and compared to some of the ice shanties you see out there now. And this is our ice shanty, and we pull it with a bombardier and that. In the winter now, we if the ice is good, if we get a good winter, we haven't had one in 3 years now that we felt the ice was safe. I was going to go this winter because it's an excellent way to be able to get fish for the restaurants and in the wintertime and that rather than run the boat through the ice and everything out here on the lake. But the ice hasn't safe, and then luckily this year I had this ice shanty and the equipment over on the ice by Murphy Park. We were going to fish on Monument Shoal, and we got a strong blow out of the southwest, and the ice all went out north of Chambers Island and all the way to Marinette and behind Green Island, and we said, no, we're not going out there anymore this year. And I got a kick out of it because in Beverly's book, I think it was 1872, they had a warm spell of almost a week, and it took all ice out of the bay completely, and it took a bunch of the fishermen that just set their nets over by Chambers Island, or where we were going to set this year too. We set in a lot of the very similar spots that the original settlers did fish. And this is a picture of lifting a net. After we get the nets under the ice, we just pull them up through a hole in the ice. But anyhow, the ice went out this year, and then they had the time in Beverly's book where the ice went out of the whole bay. But now the difference between what happened this year, it was global warming, and then it was a disaster that happened to them because of, nature did them in that year. So anyway, that's ice fishing. And at one time, it was a way also for the farmers and all the people to take a couple of nets and set under the ice and set on Green Bay mostly and provide fish for their family. This is a little bit how things have changed. This is our retail shop over there. They also, when the original fishermen were here, they had a fellow by the name of A.G. Nelson, who was a cooper. He built barrels. And it must have been so important that at least 3 times a year it was in the Advocate, they'd announce how many barrels he built. And so the barrels were about the size of those are wine barrels on our porch there and that right now. But we now, with the way they regulate the fishery, there's really only 3 live entrapment fisheries left in actually I think in the whole Lake Michigan, and that's right here in Door County. And we have one gill netter that is also fishing, and he's fished out of Sturgeon Bay. So, but I would say when we loaded the truck on Monday, all the fishermen load from up north here load their fish by our processing building there. They filled a 53-foot semi, and on this past Monday, we could have used up all of Nelson's barrels that he built all winter in one day. So, but at that time, I'm sure there were other coopers and everything, but that's the way the fishery has changed. We've gotten more progressive with fancier machinery, faster, replaced a lot of labor with machinery, like scaling machines, filleting machines. We just got a pin boning machine now, so we can make the full circuit. The fish can go through, and it used to be a real chore to hand fillet 1,000 pounds of fish. Now you can do that in part of your day's work and run them through. We smoke a lot of fish in our retail shop, and a lot of the top rack there is probably salmon for the sport fishery, and then you have your whitefish and the lake trout. We're not allowed to take lake trout, but we have to buy them from the tribal fishermen. The tribal fishermen have basically open fishing on the lake trout now, but it's only the sport fishery and the tribal guys that can take them. We'd like to try and see if we get a little more natural reproduction on the lake trout, if we could get a quota. We're on quotas. We can only take X amount of fish. The quotas are decided by the DNR. They decide the total allowable harvest that's allowed, and then each fisherman owns a percentage of that, or has bought, and you can buy and sell. Like we've bought out probably 20 other fisheries, maybe even more than that, because some of those fisheries that we bought had bought out somebody else too. You know, at one time there probably were hundreds of fishermen here up around through Wisconsin, around the Door Peninsula. But now, like I say, there's other guys that fish maybe a few days or still hold their licenses and their quotas, but the real production is done by 3 fish rigs. And not only did that production at the same time on Monday come, that was just the fish that we were able to ship out. That fish went a combination of Chicago, Canada, and New York. But we also had, I'm sure all the guys processed, as we do too, there had to be thousands of meals of fish that were served in these restaurants right here every night, you know, throughout the peninsula. And we serve restaurants and various and fish markets and that all the way down through Green Bay too. This is a picture of how we process the salmon for the people. They go on a charter. Say they come on a vacation for a week and they go out on Monday, and you know, what do you do if you caught that many fish on a charter? And so this way we offer the service that we can fillet and vacuum pack them and keep them in the freezer for them. And when Saturday comes, when they're checking out, they come and pick up their fish. And so a lot of people, I think all the charter boats bring their fish right over right away. And a lot of people come, I think, from as far as Sturgeon Bay and even further down to have it done. And they know now, too, a lot of the people that they have to come and give us 2, 3, 4 days so that we can smoke their fish, too. In the fall, we try and save our quota as much as we can to take the fish in the fall because we can also take the caviar. We get the yellow caviar out of it. We've been exporting, I think, for 40 years, the caviar to Norway and Sweden. And over there, it's highly sought after. It's a real delicacy. We first have to break the skeins apart, and then we put them in these kettles, and they're washed, they're flushed and washed like you see on the left. They're being washed, and then on the right, they're put on screens to dry, and then they're salted, and then they're packed in buckets and exported, frozen and exported. We do sell now. There's people that are interested in buying right in the retail shop and that. But it's something you acquire a taste for. You know, a lot of Americans don't eat that much caviar, but in Norway and Sweden, it's a big deal. They use it like a garnish on a lot of their meals, you know, and that a little bit on the top. Right now, my son-in-law, or Karen's husband, is in Yellowstone Park. We have been doing about 10 years now, I think, or maybe more. 10, more than 10, yeah? 12 years, okay. Yellowstone had a problem. They had the lake trout were in Lewis Lake, and when they got the Yellowstone fires, they scooped water out of Lewis Lake, and they planted lake trout in Yellowstone Lake. And Yellowstone Lake was known for its cutthroat trout. And the beautiful Yellowstone cutthroat, they really are pretty in that. I think that's why Teddy Roosevelt actually founded the park, because he loved fly fishing for cutthroat trout. But anyhow, we have 4 boats there now. Karen knows. How many employees do you think we have in Yellowstone? 22? 22 employees there. This is one of our new boats that we use there. This boat was built by the crew that was laid off when Palmer Johnson shut down. And they build the hulls for us, and then we put the engines and shafts and all the hydraulics and electronics in them. And we've had, I think, about 4 of them built now, and several other small boats too. This is a typical day going out on Yellowstone Lake in the park. They have us taking the lake trout out of there now. And I don't know, Karen, have you heard a number on how many they've got so far this year? 201,000 fish. That's not poundage. I'd say you could average, because we fish bigger twine, 5 pounds of fish. And they still are only about halfway through the year. So we'll probably take 750,000 pounds of fish out of there. And because, more than that now this year, because they had us come out with the trap nets this year too in Yellowstone. They want to get a survey of the cutthroat trout. And of course, they don't want those damaged in any way, so the trap nets fish all live entrapment. And so they can scoop the fish out of there, and I think they're tagging them, and they're going to probably get an age growth and migration study going there on those same ones. And this is one of our boats on Yellowstone Lake. This is the last Marinette 42 boat left. Right after World War II, the Marinette Marine built I think it was about 125 Marinette 35s. They built 3 Marinette 42s, and this is the only one that's surviving yet. We rebuilt it all. We had those Palmer Johnson crew work on it a lot. The whole interior, all the decking and everything is all aluminum in there now. It looks like it's all chrome inside, and the same with the other boats. Do we have another picture of one of the other boats, maybe? Not this? Well, anyway, this is also every day, all the boats, we have 4 boats running on Yellowstone right now. And every day, every boat has a biologist from Yellowstone Park, and they do their biology. They measure and sex the fish, and then we take them when they're all done with everything. We take them to the deepest place we can find in the lake, and then they dump them. When we originally went there, we said, we can fillet up these fish for you, and it'd really be an attraction in the Yellowstone Hotel, for your restaurant. And they said, no way, we can't exploit the resources of a national park. So now we just dump all of those fish, and they're beautiful. That's how thick they can get at times in the park when you're lifting. Just one after the other, they're coming in. That's in the Breeze Channel there in the park. Yes. Oh, there is a Marinette 35. We have 3 of them, and all 3. And the reason we like them is they're very roomy, and yet they're 13.6 wide. You can go down the highway. So we have a hydraulic transport that a guy from Spokane, Washington. He's a retired fireman, I think, and that's what he does. He moves these boats from one lake to the other when we do contracts, and they're the perfect boat for that. I bought another one over there that's by our driveway, and that one I think my son-in-law wants to rebuild and take it out west too. This boat is right here. This is lifting a trap net. Now you saw lifting the ponnet before. But this is the same size twine, the same size pot, and everything. This is over on the Green Bay side, probably on Larson's Reef, the way it looks. You roll all the fish to the outside edge, and then you scoop them all out of there, and you sort through them, and you take however many you want. There's a lot of days. I think a lot of people think of commercial fishing like you go out there and you catch as much as you can and you take it all. But we don't do that because we have orders for fish, and we only get one quota. And it's up to us to decide how long are you going to fish it, or when are you going to fish it. Just like I said before, we always save fall fishing to get the caviar, because you would increase, almost double the value of your fish by taking it when you can get the roll. But the same on the trap nets. You get a lot of, like you'll see some sublegal fish in there. They're all live. We'll sort through how many pounds of fish do we need that day, what do we need, and we let the rest go. So it's an excellent way to fish. I was standing on the roof of that trap net boat that we had a picture of before in Yellowstone Park, and the water is so clear, and they say, I talked to someone the guys that just came back, they said that the water is clear like that again this year. And you can see how the trap net works real good like that. You can see the center is a lead that leads the fish from shore or from a shallower water out to the deep water. And the fish follow the lead, and then they come into the hearts, and they keep circling, they keep forcing. It's like a giant minnow trap is what it is. And then it comes on into the net itself. You don't often see the water so clear and to be able to get a nice picture of how the net works. This is unusual, but it's the same thing going on today. This is Yellowstone Park again, one of the geysers going off. And I think that's the Great Falls in Yellowstone. This year, that's our boats right there. In the morning, you got to kind of watch out. So that, a couple of times I got chased out in the dock by the buffalo. And in the early morning when it's dark, when we leave, there are grizzly bears there too in that same field there. So it's a beautiful park. If you haven't been there, it's really well worth. At least there's I think a grizzly out there. That's the cutthroat that we're trying to save, and it definitely is working because we've trimmed the lake trout population down, and that's actually a bull trout, and that might be on Lake Ponderay in Idaho. That's another contract that we do. We took out lake trout to try and save the bull trout, the camaloop, and the kokanee salmon out there. That's the size of a lot of the lake trout that are out there too. Those trout are so beautiful. I tried, I don't know how many times, to talk fish and wildlife and a lot of the biologists back here into letting us take those trout that we're taking out of the lakes to get rid of out there, put them in a federal tank truck and bring them back here and put them on the reefs out here. You can do it in September when they're getting ready to spawn. Put them right there and they're ready to spawn. This is, we took this picture deliberately because now after we trim, and this is in Lake Pend Oreille in Idaho. We have a contract to take the lake trout out of there. But after we got the lake trout trimmed down enough, somebody put walleye in the lake. And the walleyes are exploding there now. So now they have us on a contract to get the walleye out of there too. And you'll talk to any sport fisherman around here, they'll say you won't see walleye in very deep water, but you can see they held that one up in front of the fathometer there by the lifter table. That's 198 feet of water. I've seen them in 500 feet of water out there. So once you get walleyes in the lake, you've got something to really deal with. And they're a fierce predator. And so we've got natural reproduction on walleyes, which the sport fishery just loves over on Green Bay. And it is a real boom over there. But it's something that we have to keep an eye on. How many can Green Bay sustain before they might start eating up all the whitefish and perch? This is a typical afternoon in Yellowstone coming in. This is a picture of what I said before. We get the new hulls from the guys that were working for Palmer Johnson and weld them up, and then we install the engines. That boat's in our building over there. That big building in back, you probably don't, the doors aren't open a lot, but there's generally a boat. There is a boat in there right now. It's the one that we bought from the DNR, the Gaylord Nelson. It's in there right now. They're re-outfitting it and that for another contract out west. That's it? Oh, okay. I don't know, did I generate some questions? I'll take some questions for a while if I.
What happened to the perch?
Well, the perch population is in pretty good shape. What happened is I think that they found their way into the lagoons down there that the DNR set up down by Swamico. And in the shallow water, they originally built them with the idea of trying to promote northern for to try and get more sport fish. That's another predator down there in Green Bay, along with the muskie, and so the perch got in there now in the shallow water, and they're able to spawn up in those weeds and that. Plus, the Fox River has been dredged and cleaned up, and the whole area down there is a lot better for perch. So we have a pretty good perch population, a good brood stock. In fact, just today, the DNR, our perch biologist from, Al, is that Pestigo? Or Pestigo, came over and measured our whole lift, so over there. So it's important, and they had, there's four to 5 year classes that are doing really good. So.
Mr. Hickey, I have a favor to ask, not a question. Would you please take a little time off from fishing and share with us in written form your vast knowledge of fishing in this area in historical form? We could all benefit from that.
And also where to, Dennis, and also where to build the docks and marinas, right?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I mentioned the Kilgore's dock, and Severn started, then Ward, and then Kilgore, and then Brands bought it. But it goes out to the southeast, and it was over by McCardle's. It wasn't over here, and it didn't go like that. And if you go out there and look at the cribs, you'll see the sailboats would sail in, and they'd come about, and they could sail right to the dock. And they could also catch their wind when they went out. But there's no way you'd get out of this dock down here with a sailboat. It's cooped in. And I sat down here last fall when we were getting a good southeast blow, and I watched those seas coming over the top of that break wall, and there was mud in them and that, and I thought, huh, I bet you it's going to be full in the spring, and it was, and so we had to dredge it again.
We have a question here, Dennis.
Did the flooding that closed part of Yellowstone and washed roads away have any effect on your operations in Lake Yellowstone?
No, because we come and go from Cody, Wyoming, and we go up through the south, or that'd be the east side, southeast side, and but also they want that contract done. Now we even added to the contract because they were worried they need to have a population estimate of the cutthroat trout, because Yellowstone River went from the average of 11 foot to 14 foot, and it really is surging through there. And the cutthroat, it's over beyond the Yellowstone Hotel, folks that have been there, and there's a big area in there that a lot of cutthroat are over that area. And not only did they need the information on the amount of cutthroat that they had in there, they were wondering just how many might be drawn down that river, and that would be all the hard work of trying to restore the cutthroat and then have them destroyed down the river. But at this point, it doesn't appear that that's happening.
You mentioned that
Here's the microphone.
opposition to transplanting the lake trout from Yellowstone to Lake Michigan or the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, and I'm not an expert fisherman, I just know a lot of liars, but they're not catching as many lake trout now in Lake Michigan as they were years ago. So why would they be opposed to transplanting the
Well,
lake trout
the
to
sport
west?
fishery isn't, they don't really care for lake trout that much. We have more lake trout out there. We don't fish gill nets in Lake Michigan as much as we used to, because there's so many lake trout, they tear your nets all up. It's just too much work to even handle it. But there's I would say by number, there has to be, if we wanted to go out there and actually had a fishery, you could go out there and catch, you name the number, we could catch any amount. But you really don't want to do that full bore at them right now until we got real good natural reproduction, which it's coming fast. It's really coming along really good. So it won't be long, and there should be room for the fish-eating public to have their shot at it. I know when they passed Senate Bill 409, which was the limited entry bill, which was to trim the commercial fishery down, the legislature in the entry to it, through that bill, said they wanted to maintain a commercial fishery for the public, because lake trout are all planted with your tax dollars. That's all federal dollars that goes there. But yet you'll have a lot of the sport groups that'll claim that that's all for us, that's theirs. And they've been able to fish them all along. They've always let them take some. They just increased their catch. And I think that with the price of fuel this year, you're not going to see the charter boats want to run out deeper to get at the lake trout than they are already. But they may be able to do it because if they go out there for rainbows. But there's a lot of lake trout out there.
In the book, Death and Life of the Great Lakes, there's a suggestion that the Great Lakes would be healthier if the native lake trout were there and the salmon weren't, because the salmon were planted there and the lake trout were native. Do you have any odd thoughts about that?
I think that might be true, but boy, now with the amount of sportsmen that and the sport interests that have developed, you would have one awful war to try and say we're going to go. I know the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. I've been an advisor to the commission for I think 40 some years now. Actually, I represent Wisconsin on the commercial fishery side of it. That the commission is pro lake trout and pro native species, and they would actually, none of the states or nobody was asked when they put two biologists decided themselves to put those salmon in those rivers over in Michigan. And at first, and through the years, they wanted to eat up the alewife, because the ale were such a problem, you know. They were on the beaches, everybody was upset over it, and that, and and then it turned out that the salmon were really eating the alewife, and it was working, and so then they were heroes. But now there's a lot of people that are thinking about it now. How do we put the brakes on this? You know, and now those same alewife populations are still holding, but it was only 2 years ago that the sport groups were after the DNR all the time to plant more. They didn't like the idea that the DNR had cut back on salmon planting, thinking that maybe we shouldn't plant so many too from the hatcheries and let it be more natural. And they caught heck. So DNR went ahead and agreed to them, and they go ahead and plant more again, and they plant more browns and rainbows and all that. And you know, to be honest, I have a feeling that between the salmon and the lake trout, they eat up all the fingerlings that they're planting, just about. Because I see the amount of salmon that they come in for filleting, and that it's mostly natural. And I say by 90%.
Say, Dennis, could you go into a little more detail on the construction of a pond net? I'm especially interested when they had wooden boats. Where did they get the poles from, and how did they set the poles, and what did it take on an annual basis to maintain those?
Well, it's a lot of work, I'll tell you that. We strung all our own pond-nets over there. We've used the old red shed originally for stringing a lot of that stuff, but now we have one side of the new building is all for stringing. We have 4 to 6 guys sometimes in the winter over there stringing nets. You can buy the twine. You have to custom order the twine, whatever size you want, and whatever depth and whatever size mesh you want, whatever shape the mesh you want. And then you put it on sidelines, and sometimes on lead core, sometimes on just nylon line, and then put trap net irons or irons on it. And then the poles, you can't get, like a 50-foot net would have a 68-foot stake. That 45 would have a 63. But anyhow, the bottoms we always made out of maple. And I would go around all over in the country and that and look at different farmers' woods and ask if I could buy, like there's 7 stakes to a net. And every year I'd try and replace at least 1 set of stakes, sometimes 2. And then we'd go out in the winter and we'd pick out like 7 trees or 14 trees that are nice and straight. The straighter you get them, the easier it is to set your net. It's hard to set it if you got crooked stakes. The net you'll never get it nice and straight like that picture you saw. So anyhow, then we would bring back the maple stakes, and then we would look for white ash for the top. It has to be nice and straight. And they're about that big around. They're almost the size of high fall poles. And we'd bring them over, and then I would generally do the splicing. We'd splice them with a 9-foot splice. We'd cut down one side on an angle and then down the other side on the other one, put them together, and then we put 6 bolts through them, and they were 5/8-inch bolts that we put through them, and we countersunk the head and the nut into the stake itself, so that it was the twine, when it bumped the stake or anything, would slide over it. It wouldn't hook on the heads and that of the stake. That's really important. Otherwise, you tear holes all over in your net the first time you get a blow or a current. And then my brother invented a hydraulic winch setup on. We actually bought a little gillnet boat because it was nice and flat bottom, and it was about 32 feet long. And he did all the hydraulics on it and everything, and we built a winch, or had put a winch in there and installed it and hitched it to hydraulic. And he made a head that had ears on it that would clamp against the stake. And we'd pull the stakes out. We'd put what you call a slip chain on all the stakes before we'd leave the dock, and then we tie them. There's 4 stakes on the inside and 3 stakes on the outside. So we start from the inside, and we'd tie 4 stakes together, and he'd tow them out to us on the winch boat or on the setting boat, and then we'd pull them up in the air and get them up a little ways. Then he'd come up with the winch and put a chain around it, a hook chain, put it around it, slide it down. Took a hook stick and slide it down, and then just start with the winch, and it just gradually come up in the air. And then we had the slip chain on the top. We could pull it one way or the other and direct it how it goes. You get it right where you want it. You get it right where you want it, and you set it down real gentle. And then you don't want to drop it, or otherwise there's a lot of places. There's that one place in Moonlight Bay that I was showing you there. There's 18 feet of mud there. If you keep pushing, it's like silica sand. It just keeps on going down. And then you got to pull them out too. You know, it's really a bear. Okay. So anyhow, he would reverse the winch and put the chain up on the stake, and then lift the boat up on it and just push it down into the mud. Once you did that, then we would put the side anchor lines and everything on it. And once we drove them in that far, but if you didn't drive them in that way, your net would only go in, say, a couple feet. And then the first blow, it would either settle down or it would tip over. You know, and but by doing that all the way down to start with, you didn't have to keep tightening your lines all the time. You could put your twine in and you were ready to fish. Let's see, what other phase of it? Well, then the twine, of course, we had a boat that we built just for setting twine, which had a lifter head and a winch, and we had what we call a shoreline, which was about 1,200 feet long, and it was 3/4 inch poly line or nylon. Went in, and then we brought it out, put it around the lifter, and the lifter would gradually turn, and it would pull the twine boat sideways, and we'd gradually feed the lead, that long lead, 1,200 foot lead or more, you know, all the way out, and the hearts would go first. You'd let those flow over, but you had to be real careful how you load the boat. You know, I always loaded the hearts all by myself after everybody went home, because I real careful to pull them on the boat so that I knew how it was going to flow out. Because once they went out, you can't back up. It would all get snaggled and crooked and everything. So you had to let them flow nice and even. And so I'd turn on that lifter, and it would go real slow, and it'd just feed real slow, and they'd feed over the edge of the boat. Once we're out of the hearts, the lead was pretty easy. That's basic, you know. And then my brother would come on each side with the anchor boat, and then he'd pull out, and he'd set the anchors. There were 300-foot lines to each side, and they were top and bottom. So they were tied on the top, on the float line, and on the lead line. Because a ponnet is top to bottom. It goes from the bottom to the surface. Where a trap net is under the water. It might only be a 30-foot net in 50 feet of water. And so anyhow, he would run out with the boat, and he'd pull. And generally, I knew how far to tell him to go, depending on how strong the current was that day, pushing against the lead. We always pulled the first anchor up current, because then when he set it, it would hook, and then the current would drift the twine back, and then it'd be right on target. So it's in a nice straight line for your lead. And if it was wrong, then we pull it again. We just keep it up until we get it just right. And I know some of the other fishermen that were fishing trap nets would laugh at us about spending all the time on trying to set a ponnet. But then when we were in there scooping, and they were looking at their net and maybe only had a couple boxes of fish in their trap nets, you know, that, but nobody else fished ponnets. We were the last ones to fish ponnets, actually on Lake Michigan.
Oh, it's so interesting, Dennis, because you have such a passion for what you do, and you know so much about it. Is there any other questions before we draw to a close tonight? I think this is one of our best programs ever, Dennis. It was absolutely wonderful. I mean, Dennis is kind of put Bailey's Harbor on the map. An interesting aside, Dennis, is our son lives in Spokane, and he went out to the lake one day and he said, "My God, there were Hickey fishing boats there." He could not believe that Hickey's and Bailey's Harbor were out in the state of Washington. But this is a wonderful, absolutely interesting program. I think all of us here tonight, we learned so much. And a lot of us had family members who fished for Weniger. And Dennis, in his wonderful shop there, has pictures on the wall where it shows some of the local people. And a lot of us local people know those people on the wall. So thank you for being such an integral part of this town. And for you people who have come tonight, the advertising, everything costs money, so we have a little collection basket in the back. So if anybody would like to donate some money to defray the costs, we would truly appreciate it. And Howard, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Good to have met you. I've heard about you for 30 years. I'm a nobody from Bailey's Harbor. I don't know. How many in here have been here all your life? There's some of you. How many of you have been here 25 years? How many of you have been here 30 years? Okay, this makes up one of the greatest group of people to know history of Bailey's Harbor I know of. We would love to have all of you become members of this organization. And look what we put together. I came here 30 years ago, knew absolutely nothing about Bailey's Harbor. Most of you, and I'm saying this, well, I'm very proud, most of you have read articles written by my wife for the Pulse. That woman knows more about Bailey's Harbor than some of the people that have been here for 100 years. But that's okay. Now what I'm going to do is get down on my knees and kind of ask and really want some help. We need members of the board, decision makers. You're here, all of you. Any of you, let us know. Unfortunately, those of us that are on the board now are not going to live forever. Because I'd love to, and I know some of the others would too. But we need people to come in. And this is not really a sexist, but men, we need you. We need you. I am the only man on a 7 board. I need help. And I thank you very much for letting me have this opportunity. Now go back and eat up our cookies and come back next month. It's on the 17th. And at that time, this lady will talk about old grocery stores. She started writing about 5 and ended up with 60-some. So, but you don't have to listen to all of it. Yes. Oh, yeah. That, help us get back. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for having me.